All right. So step 4 is on struggle to listen. Step 5, don't complain about the length of the homily. Step 6, listen for what inspires you. And step 7, listen for what upsets you. Of those 4, was there one that struck you?
I enjoyed each of them because they each spoke to me in different ways. Struggling to listen, I'll find myself, be listening to what you have to say, and then all of a sudden I'm off somewhere else in my mind. And it's not that I don't want to listen or not enjoying what I'm hearing. My brain just is going off somewhere else. And don't complain about the length of the homily. Well, I used to be Baptist, and we could sit through an hour preaching, and so the length of the homily has never been any kind of issue, for me. What inspires me, Sherry last time talked about, and also they talked about this in our retreat day, where you take a little book, and you've talked about this too, take a little book to church, and then listen to the readings and the homily and write down something that helps you to, that really speaks to you. And so I started doing that, and I put it in there. And yeah, sometimes it can be stuff that makes you feel good about things, and you're, excited. And other times it's stuff that steps on your toes and you go, ouch, yeah, that hurt. I need to, I need to pay attention to that. So each of them spoke to me.
Mildred, how about you? Any
That's
takeaways?
kind of the same. Yeah, I'm trying to read, listen the service, and then my kids, one talking on one side, the other one on the other one.
Yeah.
Kind of difficult.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for a lot of people today, our lives are normally so busy and fast paced, and things just, the subject changes quickly. If if you're watching TV, most television programs, 30-minute television program is actually only about 15 minutes. And the rest is introduction, music, and the theme song and commercials.
Yeah.
And you're only listening for about, paying attention for about 5 minutes at a time. And so we kind of get used to, and then even within a scene, the angle keeps changing and so on, and a new character comes in. And so for us to just be able to listen for a long time to anything, we don't get a lot of practice. Now, for kids, actually, they're a lot better at it than adults are. Because they're going to school, and they're used to sitting and listening to someone speak for a while, and so it comes a little bit easier for especially like high schoolers, middle schoolers who will have lectures in their classes. It's a little easier for them to pay attention, whereas for adults we're not very used to that, and so we have to just try, and sometimes it's a struggle. And then if you've got the kids with you, sometimes, especially when you're going through medical things, our bodies just get in the way. A lot of medication makes it a little harder to concentrate. If you got a sore back, it's pretty hard to concentrate on anything except your back. And so those things, they can all just make it hard. And so we just have to try, and as a listener, which I today at the funeral mass. So I wasn't the one preaching. I was just listening during the homily, and actually it's worse for priests. You at least sit and listen to a homily every week. I don't. It's rare that I'll have somebody talking to me for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time. Very rare. So I'm even worse at it than you are. What's that?
Do you want to jump in there and add something?
Well, sometimes, yeah. That's when we get to the listen for what upsets you. I'll talk about that. But yeah. So anyway, so we're the worst at it. But we do have to just recognize I've got to try. God. Some of the people that God calls to be priests are great speakers, and some aren't. And that's just the reality. And especially if the person is not the most engaging speaker, then we just have to try harder. And we can't just say, well, he's not a very good speaker. Like, well, tough. He's going to be your pastor for 10 years. You got to learn how to listen, right? And so we just got to do it. And so that's the first thing. When it comes to, when it comes to the length of the homily, I had an experience this, I don't remember how long it was ago now, but I just realized I was always just giving the introduction, right? Like introduce a topic and then time's up. And so I go sit down, right? And generally speaking, the longer is not necessarily better, but longer does allow for more depth. You just can't be very deep in a short amount of time. But the more important thing is, if we're worried about that, then we're putting something else before God. I really want to get to dinner, or I need to get to practice, or I want to get home and get on to the next thing. And all throughout the Old Testament, the prophets mentioned this past Sunday, that the commandment that the prophets repeat the most is to keep the day holy. And in every generation, people are just trying to get, they fulfill the obligation, whatever they decided their minimum duty is, and then they want to get back to whatever, they want to get back to work, or they want to get back to, doing something else. And they're putting all of those other things before God. On the other hand, we have the example in the scriptures of, this weekend, we're going to hear, Jesus, he's trying to get some time alone. And so he goes to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and the people run around the lake and they beat him there, right? Like, they're really trying to be able to listen. And they're going to spend all day getting there, listening, and then going home. So much that they're hungry and they're about to pass out because they gave Jesus that much time. And we could be inspired by that. You mentioned using a mass journal, which I don't think he mentioned that. But
Sure.
But he's talking about like paying attention to those same things. Now, I do find it to be good to write them down, but to listen, what is it that strikes me, what gets me excited, but then the other thing is to listen for what upsets you. And I know for me, as a preacher, very often, so there's a difference between writing a homily and delivering it. And very often I'll write a homily that I think is just, kind of normal, good information, things people should do, not particularly challenging. And then I'll be delivering it, and all of a sudden I'll get hit. Like, I'll be bothered by something that I said, because I know that I don't live it all that well. Or I'm giving something that's very true, that's exactly what Jesus was trying to say. And it's just, it's not one of my favorite things. There's certain aspects of our faith that I'm drawn to more than others. And that's what I want to hear about. But that's not all that I preach about. And so sometimes just some preaching, man, I don't pay enough attention to that. Or I kind of neglect that myself. And whenever something, whenever something strikes me like that, or it bothers me, we need to look at it. Sometimes I think people, and he talks about this in here, sometimes people get bothered by something and they think that the priest is wrong, which it is possible that the priest might be wrong. But more often, the things that bother us are the things that they're offending our conscience. Like, we're being wrong about the way that we live our lives, and God's calling us to repentance and to conversion. And it may not necessarily be that we're doing anything externally wrong, just that we're kind of carrying wrong attitudes, or we just have we're doing. There's two different good things you can do, and we're doing the less important of the two, when God's calling us to do the more important of the two. But those are the things that often end up bothering us, and then we should just give more attention to as the Lord's calling us to conversion. Questions, comments, thoughts about those things?
So what do you mean by, like, people thinking that the priest is wrong or when they are doing the homily?
Let's see. So, so I've had people complain about things like, the way we treat people of different races. I've had people complain about the way we talk about money. That's the most often. I've had people complain about sometimes just something they didn't understand. I've had people complain about talking too much about pro-life issues. I've had people complain about not talking enough about pro-life issues. I've had people complain about talking too much about school or not talking enough about school, right? And it, like, you know, for me, sometimes I'll give a homily and then two people will come out and complain and they're saying the exact opposite thing, right? And
That's
so,
what I
right,
want to ask, because everybody has a different point of view
yeah,
on what you say and the perception of what you are talking about.
uh-huh. And so when you hear that my point of view is different than yours, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong, but that is a place where you should pay more attention.
Mhm.
And so like, you know, so if I hear a homily and, you know, I hear things that that's not the way I would have said it, or that's not what I would have focused on. All right, so that's, for me then, that's a great learning opportunity. Like,
Mhm.
why did he think that that was the most important thing to focus on today? Maybe that's not what I would have focused on, but maybe I should have. Right? You know, why do you say that, and why does it bother me? We were talking with the baptism class a few weeks ago, and the topic was on stewardship, and they watched the diocesan stewardship video. One of the things that it talks about in the video is, you know, it's all lay people who are speaking and talking about their experience with stewardship, and you know, one of them says that, like, you know, they always used to think that stewardship was just about money, and now they realize that they've come to realize that it's not. And you know, the people in the class, in the baptism class, several of them said the same thing. You know, yeah, you know, whenever we hear stewardship, we always, you know, we think it's just about money or whatever. And so I like, why do you think that? Because we never talk just about money.
Mhm.
I am positive that I have never given a homily that was just about money. Never. And I've
Right.
never used the word stewardship as an equation for tithing. There's not, tithing is part of stewardship. It's not the same thing. I'm positive that I've never done that. And yet people get that impression. And why? Well, and they kind of wrestled with this for a little bit. They came to the conclusion, it wasn't me who said it, it was they came to the conclusion, well, that's the part that bothers us the most.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't mind sharing my time. I don't mind, you know, I don't mind serving others, but I don't want to give up my money. I really like my money. And right. And so when our money becomes our God, then that part really bothers us. And
Yes.
that's what stands out the most. And so if that, and you know, maybe it's when we talk about money, for some people, actually, their time is, they would say their time is more valuable than their money. And so, you know, for some people, it is something else. But whatever it is that we don't want to do, that the preacher is asking us to do, we should really pay attention to that. And again, it is possible that the preacher is wrong. You know, I've said things before that I've had to go back and correct. You know, it's possible that the preacher is wrong, but we should just start by asking, all right, why does that bother me? Is it true? And if it's true, then is there a way that I can live it better and embrace it more fully? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Other questions about those things before we move on to the last few steps? So then all right, so the last steps, the ones that we read about for today, focus on what do we do after Mass, you know, after it's all over, which is just as important. One of the things, you know, it always bothers me when people come to Mass, but they leave early. With the except, so Now we send out the homebound ministers, but for them, Mass isn't over. They're going to stay in Mass for another 45 minutes as they go and take communion to others. So not talking about that, but the word Mass, it comes from actually the very last phrase of the Mass. In Latin, it's ite missa est, which we translate as, the Mass is ended. Go in peace. So the very dismissal, that's what the Mass is actually named after, because that's the part that says, all right, we've received something from God now we need to go and do it in the world, right? And we're actually being charged or being commissioned by God to live differently because of this experience that we just had. And so when people cut that part off, I'm just here to get stuff, but I'm not here to go and do anything, right? We're just kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. But anyway, so here he talks in these last few steps about what do we do afterwards? What do we do after we've been preached to? What do we do after Mass is over and we go back home and we go back to work and we go back to our lives? And so he says in step 8, seek the call to obedience and action. And then step 9, talk about the homily afterward. Step 10, remember the homily later in the week. Anything that stood out to you in those 3 steps as you read it?
What stood out to me was remember the homily later in the week, because a lot of times I don't. A lot of times I'm single, so I don't have anybody here in the house that I talk to. Cats don't really interact, so I can't really talk to them about it. I've talked to some of my friends who are Catholic or quote, religious or spiritual minded about things, and that's kind of okay. But I think after reading this, it reminds me that I need to take the little journal that I'm trying to write a little bit in and look at it each day, at least during the week, and see what's stood out to me, and try to, maybe use that in prayer time and say, speak to me, Lord, about what it is that you wanted me to learn, and be able to put it into action. So.
Yeah, that's a great way to do that. If you have a day that's scheduled to pull out your journal and look at the prior weeks, can be just really helpful. Good. Mildred, how about you?
I kind of have the same, but the only person I talk to about the sermon through is my mom. When I call her, she's in Mexico. So we talk about stuff, and sometimes we disagree on certain things. She's not Catholic anymore. She turned to a different religion, but we still talk about stuff. And like I say, sometimes we disagree, but she's the only person I talk to. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that will be the same point. They're trying to remember to do it through the week,
All right. Good. So let's just kind of start with step 8, seek the call to obedience and action, and talk through them a little bit. Obedience, he makes the point, especially as Americans, we don't really like the word obedience. We don't like the idea of obeying someone else. And yet, if you read the Second Vatican Council, when it's talking about Jesus, his work of redemption, it's specifically like, if I were to ask you the question, how did Jesus redeem us? How did Jesus save us? By his what?
Death on the cross. Oh, his obedience to the Father.
Yeah. Mildred, what answer would you give?
What was that? I'm sorry.
So if it's, how did Jesus redeem us? He redeemed us by his what?
By following his Father's saying, whatever God wanted him to do.
Yeah, so the Second Vatican Council uses the word obedience. It says he redeemed us by his obedience. And, when we think of, I think most people would probably say, yeah, by his death and resurrection. Lots of people died. Dying doesn't redeem anyone. The reason why his death was redemptive, it wasn't because he suffered a lot. It wasn't because it hurt really bad. It was because it was obedient. Because at that moment, when it was hardest, when it was going to cost him everything, he said, Father, this is what you want. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so it's redemptive, because he, at that moment when he is most tempted to not live like the Son of the Father, he decides to live like the Son of the Father. So you're my Father, I'm going to do it. It looks really hard and painful, not very pleasant. Most people die from this and they don't get back up, but I'm going to do it because you said so. And that's why it's redemptive. And a few weeks ago we talked about at Mass the three munera, priest, prophet, and king. And the foundation of those is to be a priest. And a priest is somebody who offers the sacrifice, but it's the sacrifice of our own will, right? And so living the Christian life begins with that. It's accepting whatever comes from God, and embracing it and living it obediently. And sometimes it's very pleasant. Hey, take a day off once a week. All right, God, I'll do that. Right? Right. So sometimes it's not like God always asks us to do miserable things. God wants us to be happy. Mildred met a cute guy a lot of years ago, and God said, hey, marry that guy. I said, all right, God, I guess I will. I'll do that for you, right? Play with your kids, right? So it's not like it's necessarily that hard, but that act of playing with your children is holy because it's obedient. It doesn't have to be difficult or unpleasant for it to be holy. But sometimes it is unpleasant, right? And so especially when we pay attention to those things that bother us, we say, all right, I don't like that. I wish Father wouldn't talk about that all the time. But yeah, that is the truth of the gospel. I do think it is from God, and so I'm going to do it. That's obedience. We want to just kind of seek to do that, seek the call to obedience and to action. And when I talk about doing a prayer journal, I say to write two things, right? What's one thing that stood out to me, which might be something that inspires me or it might be something that bothers me. But then the second thing is, what am I going to do about it? What's one thing that I can do to put this into practice? And so this weekend, we're going to be preaching about trusting in God, and in particular with the Eucharist. The gospel this weekend is the multiplication of the loaves, where God gives us this symbol of his providence so that way we can trust in him. And so, so maybe I'm going to write down, God gives us the Eucharist as a sign that we can trust in him, that he's going to provide for us. And then what would be something I could do this week that would express my trust in God, or my devotion to the Eucharist? Somebody gave me actually it was back during the shutdown. They gave me a chaplet of the, what's it called? A chaplet of the Eucharist, I think, or of the Blessed Sacrament, I remember. Anyway, but it's a prayer, it's a little meditation prayer on the Eucharist, right? Calling us to just place our trust in God. I'm going to do that this week. It's not something I do every week, but this week I'm going to pull it out into that, right? So God calls us to trust in him through the Eucharist. I'm going to pray the chaplet of the Eucharist, right? Just two simple things. And then when we go back and we review it later on, we ask, all right, what did I learn? And did I do what I said I was going to do? If by Wednesday I haven't done it yet, all right, maybe let's get that thing out. I told God I would. I should do what I tell God I'm going to do, right?
Right.
So we accept obedience and we put it into practice. I would ask you, so just take a minute real quick, close your eyes. And let's see. So last Sunday at the English masses, told the story of being out backpacking and coming back at peace, and talked about the need for rest and the need for reconnecting with God, and turning everything else off so that we can reconnect with God and be more attentive to Him. And let's see, and it was the feast of Saints Anne and Joachim, and so we had those special readings for Saints Anne and Joachim. The gospel reading, blessed are your eyes because they've seen, and your ears because they've hear. Many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see but didn't see it, and long to hear what you hear but didn't hear it. Right. So that was last Sunday's gospel, and so I would just ask you the question. You don't necessarily answer this out loud, but this past week, did you live differently because of what you heard last weekend?
No.
And so maybe you can't think of it. And now my favorite thing that God does, by the way, is when He tells me to do something and then He does it for me. That's my favorite thing. It actually happens kind of often that, so I do in the morning, I go to the chapel and I do some time of Lectio Divina. We're praying on the scriptures. I always end by making an application, something I'm going to do this week or this day in order to respond to this. And very often I forget to do it, but I do it on accident. And it makes my day better, right? It's like, so it's as much God telling me what He's going to do for me this day as it is telling me what I need to do that day, right? And so I'll be there. I should call this friend that I haven't talked to for a while. And then that afternoon, the friend calls me before I had a chance to call them, right? I've had that happen a number of times, right? It's like God was inspiring the same thing in them, but I was ready for it because I'd had the time of prayer. And so anyway, so I say that maybe you can't think of how your life was different this week. Maybe if you spend a little more time reflecting on it, you'll see that God did something on it, like that you weren't trying to do. But I mean, maybe not. And maybe you just got to say, man, I totally wasted my time last week. My life wasn't at all different this week because of my encounter with God last weekend. But this next week, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. By next Saturday, I'm going to be able to say something that was different in my life this week because of my experience at Mass on Sunday. Right? That's a very noble goal. Does that make sense, Mildred?
Yep.
Carol?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. So we want to find a way, and I would add, like, the more specific the better.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask people, like, how do you want to grow in your faith? Well, I want to be a better Catholic.
Yeah.
All right, what does that mean? Like, what are you going to do differently? I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better wife. I want to be better with my family. Well, what does better mean? Right? Does that, when you say you want to be a better dad, do you mean more stern? Because that may not be better. Now, if you're not very stern, if you're a pushover, maybe being more stern is being a better dad. But if you're already too strict, being stern doesn't make you a better dad, right? So I like to say, when you make a resolution or you make an application, which a resolution is like long-term, an application is short-term. So you make an application this week, I'm going to do this. Don't use the word better, because better doesn't really mean anything. I'm going to, instead of like, I'm going to be better about doing the dishes after dinner, I'm going to do the dishes every day right after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a good application. Or, instead of I want to be better about telling my husband how much I love him, I'm going to tell my husband every day, I love you. Right? That's a good application. Right? It's just really clear. It's to the point. I know if I did it or not. And at the end of the week, I can say, yeah, I lived better this week because of what happened last weekend, and because I decided to put that into practice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good, good. All right, then. So step 9, talk about the homily afterward. Carol, you mentioned you've got a few friends that you sometimes talk to. Mildred, you talk to your mom.
Yes.
And this is the one that like as Catholics, we're probably the least comfortable with. We, especially, at least here, now, I would say, so Mildred, your experience may be different.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, in the United States, white Catholic culture is like Northern European. It's mostly German and Irish. Those are the two cultures that influence us the most. And they both have a very, especially the German, just has a very private sense of religiosity. And so talking about your faith is not really accepted. And it's kind of like the Germans, they tend to really just compartmentalize things. And so it's like religion is the priest thing. And it's what we do when we're at Mass, but that's it. And in life, they tend to be very compartmentalized in the way that they view things, and especially when it comes to religion. Hispanics, not so much. Hispanics, much more kind of charismatic, things flow. There's not a hard line between what's religious and not religious. And so, like if I go to a white family's house for dinner and the conversation turns to religion, maybe it's something that I said in the homily, right? Sometimes, that'll happen. Everybody gets quiet and they listen to me. And that's it. And I go to a Hispanic family's house, and first there's probably like 5 families there. But if I'm there, eventually the conversation will turn to what's going on in church, and everyone will join in. Right? It's kind of just a different way of doing things. And so it's not so like, this is the priest thing, shut up and listen. It's, let's have a little dialogue. So a little different, different way of approaching this. But I do think it's a good thing. And when we were doing before here at St. Anne, we were doing the adult small groups. They would always be they would meet each week. Adults would meet each week, and the lesson was it was kind of like the homily part 2, right? So we would talk about it at Sunday and then go deeper into it later on during the week, which is a good thing to do. And I know some people are like still doing that informally. And that was the idea with the Corn Stream, the radio show, was let's just kind of go back and talk about it some more and kind of go deeper in and have a little conversation. And so we try to do things to foster it. It's really tough. But I do think it's something that's really good. One of the things I found is that you can just only learn so much in a short period of time, and you can only grow so much. And so if you just, if you spread it out, then it has more time to sink in. It's kind of like, with rain, if you get 10 inches of rain in 1 hour, the ground doesn't soak in very much of that. Most of it runs off into the river. But if you get 10 inches of rain over 4 days, then that's wonderful for the ground. It all sinks in, it all soaks into the ground. You're at the same amount of rain, but the ground is able to soak it in that way. And we're the same way. And so if we take a homily and we listen to it for 10 minutes or for 15 minutes or for whatever it is, that's fine for 15 minutes. But if we can come back later in the day or later in the week and talk about it some more, then it's going to soak in a whole lot more, because now that exposure to the gospel has been has been spread out. And so, I know some ways that people do it. Families, I know some families who, as they're driving home from Mass, Dad asks everybody, "Hey, what did you learn today? What did you hear today? What struck you at Mass today?" And maybe it's just something as simple as that. And Mildred, for you and your family, just get in the habit of everybody saying one thing that they heard. That's just a very, very simple and easy way to start. Maybe it means you call somebody else right now, because as we're live streaming Mass, and then it stays there available on YouTube. You can watch it later. Yeah. So maybe Mildred, maybe you say, "Hey, Mom, why don't you watch Father's homily today, and then we'll talk about it later on the phone." Right? She in Mexico, she's able to watch it. Or Carol, you do that with one of your friends. "Hey, why don't you watch our priest homily, and then if your friend is from a different parish, why don't you watch it and we'll talk about it." It's kind of just a good opportunity there that comes from our current use of technology, that it's there and it's recorded. Related to that, by the way, on the step 10, remember the homily later in the week. So you can review your notes. You can also just go back and listen to the whole homily.
Sure.
And every once in a while I've had, well, they don't now because they don't have to ask, but every once in a while somebody would say, "Father, can I have your notes for that homily?"
Yeah,
or,
I've done it once.
"Father, did you record this? Can I get a recording of that homily?" And now we're just making them always available there. But before I'd record it, I started recording it for myself, so I could just, go back and listen to it and see how I was doing and see if what I said made sense, and just to allow myself to be nourished by it. But now that they're all recorded, you can, go back and be able to review it. Does that make sense?
Yep, like game tapes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what, that's a great analogy, really. So athletes who want to be great, they go back and they watch those videos over and over again. They watch themselves, they watch other players, they see what everybody's doing. They want to know what their opponent's doing. They want to know what, people who play the same position for a different team, they want to know what they're doing. Right. You don't just play the game and move on, but you keep trying to get as much as you can out of it.
Yep.
I remember when I was, so a different analogy, when I first went down to Mexico, we were having dinner. I think it was pozole. I'm pretty sure they made pozole to welcome us. It was, it was good. And so they gave us limes that were just cut in half. And so I, not really knowing how to squeeze a lime, I take it and just squeeze it, and a little bit of juice comes out into the pozole, into the soup, and that's it. And I set it down, and I grab, because it's not very much lime juice, and take another one and squeeze it, and a little bit of juice comes out. And then the guy who was our host, he takes one and he squeezes it, and then he starts wringing it. And I was amazed at how much juice comes out of a lime when you just twist it back and forth, right? And I think that's what we want to do with homilies, right? I don't want to just get the little bit of juice that I got at first. Let's wring it. Let's let's listen to it again. Let's talk about it. Let's make some particular plans to put it into action this week and see what happens. And and when we do that, when we start living that way, like God's really saying a lot. And even if your journal has one line that you think was from God and one line that you think is your response to God, if you keep going back to that and you pay attention to whether or not you do it and you put it into practice in your life, you'll find that God is actually really saying a lot to you, and we become very much aware of his presence with us. It's the reality of God in our lives. And, that changes everything.
Mhm.
That changes everything, especially now in these times when, we're isolated from so much to be able to be more aware of God's presence. It dispels all of our fears.
Mm. So we're going to ring it this week.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what then? So as we think about all of those steps, the steps for preparing, the steps for listening, the steps for putting it into practice afterwards. What's maybe two or three, like particular concrete things that you're going to do here before Mass this weekend, during Mass this weekend, after Mass? What's, maybe two or three particular concrete things that you're gonna try this week?
I think I'll try to going for the listen for what inspires me on what you say, and try to do it through the week.
Okay.
Like remember, to do whatever is on the homily.
All right. Is there a particular time during the week that would be good for you to review the prior Sunday's homily?
I don't know.
Maybe like Wednesdays midweek?
I was thinking about maybe Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. And as you think about those days, is there a good time in your schedule?
I will say sometime after 4:00.
Okay. Do you have like some regular prayer time that you have set aside then, or is that just when the day slows down? Or
No, normally my prayer time is before I go to bed.
okay, so
I have a coworker that gave me a little prayer book, which is awesome. I use that every night.
Okay.
Yeah.
So remind me, where do you work at?
TJ Maxx.
So how long is your drive home? About 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So what if when you get in the car after work on Wednesday, because you drive alone, right?
Yes.
So maybe when you get in the car after work on Wednesday, you review your notes on the homily, whatever you wrote down, and then as you're driving home, you reflect on it. Hey, how have I seen that happening this week? Did I do what I said I was going to do? And if not, if I haven't done it, well, then I'm going to make sure I do it tonight or tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So maybe that's not the best time for you. Maybe, especially if you're not a good driver, then just totally pay attention to driving. But maybe it is. Maybe that's a good kind of just reflective time, and it's not. Then you're not taking a whole lot of extra time, because you're going to be driving anyway. But so when I say like you want to be specific, that's what I mean. I don't want to review it sometime during the week. I'm going to review it on Wednesday right after work. Right. And just make an appointment, put it in your calendar, put it in your phone, set an alarm. If you need an alarm for class, you maybe need an alarm to.
Yes, I set the alarm too.
Me too.
Carol, how about you? What are 1, 2, 3 things that you want to do specifically this week?
First of all, I want to be prepared for the readings. This week has been a little easier because I'm supposed to lecture. So I've been preparing through the week with the readings for Sunday, but make sure that I do that. And then on Sunday, of course, listening and writing in the journal what speaks to me, how the Lord speaks to me. And then what I want to do about it is I want to set a time aside to go to Adoration Chapel. I have not done that. And I feel like it would be really good for me. And I'm thinking usually Wednesday or Thursday, just like with Mildred, Wednesday or Thursday is probably the best time because Tuesday night I work, and so Wednesday or Thursday would be good to go right after work because I'm just right down from here or from there, and go in and spend some time with my little journal, looking over it and being quiet with God so that we can go back over it, and taking time to look throughout the week at the little notes that I've written. So
cool. Good. Yeah, awesome. So just a couple of notes on that. Right now, you're welcome to go to the Adoration Chapel anytime you want to, but the Eucharist is only exposed right now on Wednesdays and Fridays until we get more people scheduled, and then we'll open up more times. Except when school starts, we're going to add Thursday afternoon, but it'll be in the church instead of in the chapel.
Oh, okay.
That way we can take classes of students over and not cram them all in a little room. So, so on Thursdays, we're going to start exposing the Blessed Sacrament from 2 o'clock until 6 o'clock.
Oh, good.
We'll start the Spanish Mass in the church. That'll start probably like the second week of September, maybe the third week of September.
Okay. So, thank you.
But you're welcome to go into I go to pray in the chapel even when the Eucharist is in the tabernacle. It's still a great place to pray. So,
still right there.
Yeah. Good. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on this reading or this chapter?
I think this has been really good. A really good exercise to read and then be able to sit down and dialogue back and forth about it. I appreciated your doing that. Thank you.
Good. You both work mornings?
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting ready to start a reading group that's going to meet Thursday mornings after Mass. But we're open to. We're trying to find ways to foster faith formation. It's pretty tough. Generally, faith formation is done best when people come together, and we're trying to do it without coming together. So they're going to do the reading group outdoors. That way, they're not breathing each other's air. But we may try to create more opportunities like this. Probably not in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday. That was just when we.
Well, it was a good thought, but
well, when we scheduled it, it was the only time that we could find in our calendars to do the same time 3 weeks in a row.
Sure.
But we may do something similar to this at other times of the day or other times of the week.
Good.
So.
Yeah, I was disappointed when I saw that the book deal was going to be on Thursday morning, but I thought, well, like you said, you've got to reach out to get the most response, and you've got a good solid core of people who can come to morning Mass. So. Well,
and if somebody else would like to start one, we're not the only people capable of leading a book discussion. So if there's someone, and there'll probably be some people who are watching this on YouTube later on, but if there's anybody else who'd like to start a group, we'd be able to guide you and get you set up, advertise it, and guidance, and make sure it's a good experience. So we're limited in what I can do personally, but we're not very limited in what we can do as a parish. So, all right, well, good. Let's entrust all of these things to Our Lady and ask her intercession for us as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Saint Anne, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so I'm going to upload this and put it on YouTube. So if there's friends or anybody else that you would you think would benefit from this discussion, feel free to share it with them. Or if you need to go back and review it, you're welcome to do that as well. But thank you both for joining us, and we'll see you at Mass.
Okay, thank you, Father.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mildred.
Bye.